So we're going to move on to our final soapbox session before we have a short break, and we're going to move on to Richard Smith, who normally talks about butterflies, but today is going to be talking about hedgerows, trees and carbon. So over to you, Richard.
Thank you. Just first of all to say, as Alison mentioned, I would normally do talks about butterflies, but because I'd already sort of bagged a soapbox slot about something else, what I'm going to talk about is not crammed full of detailed facts. It is a sort of soapbox. Please think about this, everybody. The views that I'm expressing here are entirely mine, not those of butterfly conservation, although they do relate to butterflies. So hedges, a subject that's always been dear to my heart. My father was a hedge layer, and I've done all sorts of projects that relate to hedgerows. So what we're been trying to achieve in a project in the WW area, but some of it just about impinges in Subrac, is trying to persuade the landowners that hedgerow management needs to be somewhere between this first slide and the second slide. So that's two extremes, if you like. If I go back, then you will see that's a slightly over-managed hedge that is gappy, thin, narrow, not very tall, and a bit of a sort of nightmare for wildlife. But whereas this has gone to the other extreme, that this actually happens to be very suitable for a particular species of butterfly that lays its eggs on young blackthorn, brown hair streak, which we don't have much of in Subrac area, only just on the very edges occasionally. So we've tried various ways of trying to encourage the achievement by landowners of something in between and raise the profile of hedges for butterflies in this case. But there's no doubt in my mind, and I know a lot of other wildlife charities would agree, that undermanaged hedges or bulky, voluminous hedges can be really good for wildlife, particularly if they're not flailed every year. So we've tried various initiatives. We're getting landowners to come into schemes and try and put signage up for the flail contractor. I won't go into details on this, but we did have some success. This is just some statistics I was able to get hold of for the sites that we started to manage for brown hair streak by rotational coppicing, a little bit of hedge laying rather than, so that's the green, sorry, the olive colored line there. And this is at the top of the chart because this is a small number of meters you have to walk for the number of eggs you find of this butterfly, whereas the grey is what happens if you just leave it to chance and modern farming. So this is one of George's, if he's listening, charts that he produced for us, and you can just see from that how in the last, if you just look at the last 2 decades, 2000 through to 2019, this is divided into 4 here, we have had a huge contraction in range. Not all of that will be down to overmanagement of hedges. A significant contribution will have been made, but almost certainly now we're finding more and more of a climate change impact, particularly as these sites over towards Cardigan probably reflect the start of a southeast to northwest shift in the range and the concentration. But more dramatic, you can see the red area being the decade 2000 to 2009, which was the area occupied, and now the green enclosed area is 2010 to 2019. Dramatic decline. So we can show that in various different ways. That's solid blue, solid light blue is the still occupied decades, and obviously the ones that have gone are transparent blue. George and Mark Lunn, as some of you may know, looking at blackthorn. So we've done annual surveys for this species on blackthorn for a good 20 years now. And I'm moving just very quickly onto a subject which relates perhaps at least in part to the proposed new Welsh Government Sustainable Farming Scheme. And a lot of you will probably have heard already that there's a stipulation in there that at least 10% of the land must be covered in trees. And this is for climate change carbon reasons. And this scheme will probably be coming in the next 18 months. Because we've had a vacancy in our staff for about 18 months now, we haven't had a lot of resource to actually devote to researching this. But I just wanted to flag up that the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust, and sorry, their logo hasn't come out properly there, they have done some research at their research farm in Leicestershire called the Allerton Project, which has had some fascinating results because they've looked at whether hedgerows are a better way of achieving carbon retention than planting trees. And okay, so I won't read all of that out, but I can provide the link if anybody wants to go to their website. But you'll just see a few headlines there. The new code that they developed will become the quality assurance standard for hedgerows, aims to generate hedgerow carbon credits independently certified by organic farmers, who already do the same for woodland carbon code. I think I've probably skipped a slide.
I think we sort of need to wrap up fairly quickly, otherwise we're going to have...
Yeah, I'll crack on. Right, so what it says there, I hope you can read that, but hedgerows are at least disappeared under all the paraphernalia at the top of the screen, but hedgerows at least conserve carbon at least twice the rate of woodland because they're three-dimensional linear structure, blah, blah, blah. So similar to the woodland carbon code, and you'll come with blah, blah, blah. So just moving on then. The idea of this research is that if they can attach a value to the volume of hedgerows, that is another option which should be looked at for biodiversity and carbon sequestration. And it seems to have some kind of endorsement by the independent statutory body, the Climate Change Committee. So interestingly, what I hope will happen, and I'm not in any way in control of this other than flag it up, is that at least the option for farmers of looking at bolstering their hedgerow volume would be an alternative to having to find 10% of their land to plant trees on. A farmer I spoke to last week actually said, well, he's got 8% tree cover already on his 250 hectares, and he can't think where he's going to put them. So he'll probably go out and buy a few more hectares just to plant some trees on it. So we all know that trees can get planted in the wrong places. So this is just another option I think we need to look at. That's me. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Richard.